Hi everyone, welcome to the Psychology of Dating podcast. You're listening to Nadine Newkirk, me. I'm both a clinical psychologist and a dating coach. In today's episode, I'm going to talk about how to clarify labeling in a relationship or dating. Before we jump into that, I'd like to remind you that you can access my free guide called Top 3 Mindset Shifts in Dating. You can find this in the episode show notes where there's a link to my website and you can access it there from the contacts page. Okay, so today's podcast episode was a question that one of the listeners actually posted to me. You might have heard in previous episodes that if you have any topics or questions about dating that you're really wanting to hear on this podcast, you can message me via the contacts page of my website. And this listener asked, how do you approach to ask for labeling in a relationship? And this could look like checking in with someone, seeing whether they want more commitment or whether they just want to have fun. And I thought this was a fantastic question, really relevant, and often where a lot of people get themselves in a bit of a pickle, where, you have one idea in your head and it's not really clarified with the other person, and this can create a lot of anxiety, whether or not you want to be in a relationship and you haven't clarified it with someone, or you just want to be casual and you also haven't clarified that. So let's have a little think about what type of labels you could talk about or clarify with someone when you're dating. This could be labeling it as a relationship, that you want to be either a committed monogamous relationship, just each other. Maybe you want a non-monogamous relationship where you're committed to each other and you also see other people at the same time, ethically. Or maybe you want to label the connection as casual, that you enjoy hanging out with the person romantically and as friends, but you don't see it turning into a long-term relationship. Maybe you want to keep dating other people while seeing this person, or maybe you're not really open to a relationship at the time and you just want something casual. So why would you want to label? It can be a really uncomfortable conversation. It means that, you really have to be honest with yourself and check in where you're at. Why go through this bother? Why have this difficult, hard conversation? It increases transparency. So the more you are actually clear on what the other person wants and clear in speaking about what you want, you're both not just mind reading, jumping to each other's heads. And if we're mind reading, it means we can really get ourselves in a difficult situation. You might be hanging out with someone several times a week, messaging daily, and assume that this is heading towards a relationship and this is what you want. And then several months down the track, you find out they don't actually want a relationship. And if you're wanting a relationship, this is 3 months that you've become more and more attached to this person. 3 months that spent you couldn't look for someone else. And also 3 extra months where you're more attached, and then it's going to lead to more of a heartbreak. So being transparent from the beginning, although it sometimes can hurt, saves you from more hurt down the track. Also, if you're wanting something more casual, each time that person messages a bit more or wants, to invite you to something with their friends or up the ante, you could be getting extra anxiety. And if it was clear what was going on, then there's less hurt for the other person, less anxiety, less stress for you. Clarifying labels can also help you speed up to get where you want to get to and help a relationship flourish. So for example, imagine you want to start a cookie business where you bake cookies and sell them. And you're talking to different people and you meet someone who's like, oh yeah, that's a great idea. My grandma has amazing recipes. Her dough is the best dough. I reckon that's a really great idea. I could do it with you. You don't know, is that person just chatting about some dreams, but they don't really have intention to start it? Or maybe they already have a full-time job and they're thinking this is just a little tiny side hobby when you want to actually dedicate it as a full business. You're not really sure what that person's talking about. They might be saying the words that you want to hear, but unless you know the context, you don't actually know where that partnership, that cookie partnership would lead. But imagine you clarified with that person, hey, I want to go full-time in this cookie partnership business. I can see myself doing this lifelong, and I'm really looking for someone who wants to do that. One, it helps you move faster through people who don't want that same thing, so you're not wasting time. And two, it also helps you find someone who's just as enthusiastic, and then that can really help the cookie business flourish. So if you meet someone, you're like, hey, this is what I want to do, you lay it all out, they're like, that's exactly what I want as well. Imagine how excited you'd feel. You'd know you're on the same page and you can progress with those milestones of building that business together much more quickly. And that's the exact same as a relationship. If you really do want, for example, a long-term committed relationship, asking someone and clarifying can help that relationship thrive if they're the right person. And often people avoid the conversation because they're too scared of scaring people off, but you want to scare off the people who aren't on the same page as you. That as much as you can hope things will change, that they'll come around, it's going to ultimately lead to hurt if you're not on the same page. So the next question is, how do I know when to clarify with someone about labels in a relationship? And I'll tell you first what not to do. So what you don't want to do is try and guess based on external things. You might be looking at, okay, I can only ask to be exclusive after X number of dates, or I can only ask if they're messaging this much, or if they're talking to me about these things. That is going to end in confusion, because you can have some people who love bomb, which is where they say all these words that you want to hear, but they don't actually have the exact intention that you want. And that something can quickly feel like a lot of passion and fireworks, but then quickly fizzle. And it also is exhausting because you're constantly just trying to guess. And what we want to do is be proactive and come from a sense of agency from your side rather than waiting for the other person. So the answer is tuning into yourself and your emotions. If you are feeling really excited with someone, you're finding that the relationship's going well, there's those values there, maybe kindness, consistency, you've had dates where you feel like you've got to know them and you want to ask for exclusivity, then that is the right time. Your emotions tell you. So this can be different for every connection or every relationship. It could be after several dates for one person. It could be after several months for another. And you might find yourself that, you're dating 4 people in a year, and with one person you were ready much earlier and one person you're ready later. And that's okay, because bonding is different for each individual person you meet, each individual context, stage of life where you're at. Imagine you go to a farm and you meet various different animals. There'll be different animals which you bond with quicker, different ones you don't bond with as much. It's just the same as humans. It's important to remember, if you want to ask someone to be exclusive in a relationship, it doesn't mean that you need to know the future and predict ahead whether or not the relationship's going to work out or whether you want to be in a really long-term relationship. It just means right now, in this moment, you're enjoying spending time with this person, you see potential, and you would like to have some clarification to help this connection thrive, if it will. So it's a small step. It's not a giant leap. Clarifying is there to get you on the same page. Just like if you are asking someone to start a cookie business with you, if you clarify that you're both wanting to start it and in the same way, then you can start out and try and get investors and things like that. It doesn't mean that the business will last. It might not, but it's not going to thrive unless you really clarify from the outset what you're wanting. You're making an agenda. That's the same with a relationship. When I was dating, I had people where it really seemed like it was going to be a long-term relationship. There was lots of conversation, chatting, messaging every day. There was going on multiple dates a week, it was lasting for like 5 weeks. I asked for exclusivity. They said, yeah, sounds great. And then a couple of dates later, they started to ghost and turns out they didn't want to continue. It didn't mean I regretted asking for exclusivity, because it wasn't that broke it. It was that actually helped speed up to find out where the other person was at. And I could have not asked that question and gone on for another 3 months, but if they really actually didn't want to be in a relationship, that would have been closing doors for me to be able to find the person who wanted exactly what I wanted. When you're asking for labels, you might also be on the other side, where you're sensing maybe the other person wants something more, or you're feeling a bit uncomfortable because you can see the relationship progressing and you want to clarify, hey, I just want something casual. So how do you know when to talk about that? Again, it's in your emotions and how you feel. Your emotions tell you your boundaries. They tell you what you want in a relationship. If you're starting to feel really anxious or uncomfortable, that's a clue. Your emotions are sending you a little notification system. Hey, there's something we got to address here. So if you're feeling uncomfortable, it might be checking in with your thoughts, and maybe there's fears of letting the other person down. Maybe there's fears that you're going to get kind of dragged into something that you don't want to be in. So it's really important to clarify, what do I want? Maybe you have a lot of fun with this person. You both love ice skating and you do that, and it's also romantic. There's lots of sparks there and you want to keep hanging out, but you can tell they're not on the same page. Maybe there's a deal breaker that doesn't align. A country they want to live in, kids or no kids. Maybe you can see there's some characteristics that aren't aligned with your values. Once you realize that you don't want long-term and you have those feelings, those emotions signaling to you, that's the right time to ask. So it's always about your emotions. If you are feeling something that's quite high intensity, maybe it's 5 or more out of 10, with 10 being the highest intensity, that's usually a clue this is something that you shouldn't ignore. Because even if it's like, oh, it's a 5 and I can just push it to the side and keep having fun with this person, eventually those feelings are going to come back. And it's going to be like a thorn that you have in your toe. It'll get small, but it gets bigger and bigger over time, and soon your whole foot's swollen and hurts and you can't walk anymore. And, you have a whole lot more stress than was necessary. There are just a couple of side notes to how to know when to ask someone about labels. The first one is, if you are wanting to ask someone for exclusivity, you need to make sure that it seems like they're a good long-term relationship material. Do not ask exclusivity because you think that's going to help them turn into the person that I want them to be, that they will change in the future. You want to ask based on right now, their actions, how they're showing up, how it feels for you when you're with them and when you're not with them. Does this feel like something that you want to pursue? Then say yes to ask for it, but don't do it as a band-aid. The other caveat for asking about labels and using your emotions is not talking about labels and asking for something because it's easier than having the true and honest conversation. For example, maybe you have a tendency to push others away when it gets a bit more intense, or you can tell someone really likes you. Maybe your nervous system flares up and you're like, oh, this feels too much. And you want to dodge that uncomfortable feeling. And you tell the person, I'm not interested, because it's a quick and easy way to get a bit of relief, so you don't feel like you're being smothered. But when you actually deep down look at what you wanted, you would have been really interested in something a bit more slower paced, or still being able to hang out with this person, but you wanted maybe to message a bit less or not see that person as frequently. It was feeling like a bit too sped up for you. But maybe that conversation feels a bit too vulnerable. Maybe there's more risk of getting hurt because there's a fear, what if I ask that and this person either gets really hurt themselves, or maybe I ask and they say, no, that's not for me, and then I feel extra hurt. You might be avoiding asking for things you want because of that fear of hurt. But the thing is, you're going to be more hurt in the long run by not getting your needs met. It might feel easier, for example, just to not date at all, But if you're actually really wanting some companionship, some fun, you're going to be hurt in the long run. Or vice versa, if you're really wanting a relationship and with kids and you're too afraid to ask someone or tell someone, hey, I want kids, because you're afraid that they're going to be scared off, it means that you're not going to be giving yourself the best opportunity to meet someone who's on the same page and wants the same thing as you. You might be spending a whole lot of months, years dating people who were never on the same page to begin with. And not getting your needs met, not being with someone who's on the same page is going to ultimately lead to more pain. So even though it's scary, even though it's hard, having those vulnerable, honest conversations will get you more quickly to where you want to get to. It's just about being able to tolerate those uncomfortable feelings. And remembering though, although they could feel really intense and really big, they are feelings that your body, will produce them. They'll come up like a wave and they'll also come down again. That emotions are not permanent, but if we can head in the direction we want to, get our needs met, that is going to be long-term fulfilling. The last question, thinking about how to talk about labels when you're dating, is how do I specifically ask for what I want? How do I talk about that? And again, I'll start with what not to do, because this can be really common. What people might do is try to communicate it in nonverbal ways. Maybe you really want to hang out with someone, them to be in a relationship with you, so you do all these grand gestures, like buy them flowers or try and organize plans or meet their friends, because you think if that's done, that means they want it too. Or maybe on the other side, you're wanting something casual, so you're slowly stopping messaging someone, or maybe you're trying to drop hints but not being very clear. We don't want to beat around the bush. We want to be very direct and say what we want. And we don't want to start with asking the other person, so, what do you want? Do you want a relationship? That's usually coming from a place of, again, not wanting to be vulnerable. But it means you're probably going to hear their answer and then just tailor what you say to what they say. If they're like, oh, I just want some casual, you're like, oh, yeah, me too. And then just hope that they change their mind later. It's better to just come in, say what you want, and then let the other person respond. When you say what you want, we want to be to the point, direct, we want to be honest. You can name a dilemma if it feels a bit uncomfortable. For example, you might say, I don't know how it's felt dating for you this last couple of months. For me, it's felt like we've started to hang out with each other more and it started to progress. And I know it's uncomfortable, but for me, I don't actually see this as a long-term committed relationship. I'm really enjoying hanging out with you and having a lot of fun though. So I'd be keen to keep hanging out with you and also be dating other people, of course, only if that's okay for you. And then let the other person respond. Or you might say something like, I'm really enjoying hanging out with you. For me, I would feel most comfortable if we were just dating each other. And I do recommend, if this conversation feels hard to you, write it down, because when we have hard conversations, we often kind of skirt around what we want to say, or we add a lot of words, or we get a bit stressed in the moment and don't end up actually saying what we wanted to. You could look at some of my other podcast episodes to help you. You might look at Dear Man, which talks about how to ask for your needs, to be assertive. You might look at the episode on fast skills, which is how to maintain your self-respect in a relationship and having difficult conversations. So those are all tools that you could also listen to as well. Okay, everyone. Once again, it was lovely speaking with you all. And I do remind you, if you have a topic like this one today or a question, feel free to drop me a line. And yeah, you'll be hearing it on this podcast soon. Thanks very much.